get started, I like to have a lint-free towel available. I just get these at Walmart. This is the brand of paper towels I use just to clean up. I like them. They're durable. They're a little better than a lot of the paper towels I've used. You're going to want to use some lacquer thinner. And I put some in a smaller bottle. It's easier to clean with. And then these little airbrush cleaners are actually at Harbor Freight for like super cheap, $1, $2, I don't even know anymore. Been a while. I just bought it like 10 of them last time I was there, and they last forever. But you'll be using the smallest one in here quite often. You can get inside the airbrush with that. You want to have some lube. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we'll take the back off the airbrush. I like to loosen the screw. Take the needle out carefully. This is so it doesn't get damaged. I take it out right away. Okay, and then we'll place it nicely in the cup to let it start soaking. I'll go ahead and put that backing screw back on. We'll unscrew this and try not to turn that. There's no point in taking it all apart. It can all stay together. That ain't gonna hurt nothing. This all can come apart together. There's a spring in there. Inside there, spring loaded. We'll just throw that in the cup. Let all that soak. Go ahead and pull the trigger. Alright, next up, we're going to take off the front here. Be careful, there's a lot of little pieces in here. And it came out. Sometimes that just stays in there. It's kind of press fit. They're machined to fit right inside there. Okay. I'm going to soak this because if this gets plugged up at all, that causes your airbrush to spit. There's also, I don't know if you can see it, there's little bitty holes inside this. We're going to clean those out too really well, so I'm going to go ahead and let this soak. And I'll let this soak for a few minutes. Another thing I can do is take off my filter that goes on just before the airbrush. Not everyone has these. These are actually pretty great. Keeps the moisture out, a little moisture trap right before. It's got like a way you can bleed off the water in it. Okay. Take off your lid. Let it soak. I like to soak all the parts. I think it does a better job. Alright, something I didn't show earlier was a Q-tip or a cotton swab. You dip it in the lacquer thinner. That's what I have sitting in here for all the parts to get cleaned. Set it in there. Alright, now we'll take our Q-tip and I can clean inside. Look at that. Thing is, I clean this pretty good, but this is like how you deep clean these. Get in there really good, clean out all the gunk. Flip it around, use the other side. I'll clean up all the little threads. Look how dirty all that is. Gets all that stuff out of there. Okay, I'm gonna grab another one. I'm gonna dip it. Now I'm gonna clean inside the airbrush. Just gonna go in here. I'm gonna kind of clean up right where the trigger goes in. Sometimes it's kind of tricky to get in there with anything else. Let's see here. I have those brushes too, but this cotton swab will kind of get in there. I keep my airbrush fairly clean. I clean this quite often. They say not to take them apart any more than you need to. Only when you know, I mean, you have to obviously clean the paint out of them. But this is like taking it all the way apart. This is something I wouldn't do all the time. But get all the everything. It's a good time just to do a deep clean every now and then. It makes it paint a little better. Start having troubles with it spitting and stuff, it's time to do it. Alright, now I'm going to start using my little brushes. I like using the smallest one on this Harbor Freight. If I can find them online, I'll have a link to them. But I can run this inside here. I'm going to push down inside where the trigger goes in. Spring loaded in there. Just going to clean inside there. Keep dipping it. Gets paint. sometimes the paint will come back in here. It'll get in there and your trigger will stick. This is how you fix the trigger sticking issue. Alright, there's a little air orifice here, the little hole for the air. Get in there just a little ways with the smaller one. The medium-sized cleaning brush. Now we're going to clean inside the front here. You can see inside there. See if I can get some light. See it in there. Kind of turn it around. Scrub it. That cleans it really well. This is really important that you do this ever so often because it gets built up with some paint that just won't come off. That'll really clean that cup out really good. Now we're going to take the towel. I'm going to soak it. We're going to go in here and I'm just going to clean out the inside of the cup and the outside of the brush really well. And there you go. Looks all shiny, everything, all the paint's out of it. Before we put it all back together, we're going to clean all the parts and set them out on our tray. Needle. Be good to use latex gloves while you do this. This lacquer thinner is pretty potent stuff, and it'll actually be kind of bad for your hands. Dry them out. I go in here, clean out any grooves and stuff that I hadn't got yet. Just doing a good job. You know, every now and then it's good to do a good job on your brush. Okay. Now this here, to clean this part here, this is a very important part. This is machined very precise. We do not want to damage this. So what we're going to do is, the way I clean it out is I'll use that smallest one to start out with. Pipe cleaner thing here. And I'm just going to clean, and it actually fits perfectly in there. It just scrubs just inside there. Now you're not going to push on it very hard. You're just doing it barely. Okay, because this part here, if you stretch this out with the needle and waller out this hole, this perfectly precise hole, then it will spit. You'll never have it spray precise lines. So I just do that, and then a lot of times I'll take an old needle, not the one that came with it. I have a couple extra. This is just how I do it. But I'll lightly run that through, just very, very carefully, and just lightly touch. Not putting any pressure. If it hangs up, don't. Just make sure there's nothing caught up inside there, okay? And if there is, there'll be some on there. My airbrush is very clean, so it shouldn't have anything. Now the reason we left that together is just so we don't lose the parts. So now I'm just going to go ahead and open it up. Lay it out in order. There's a spring in there. It's already got gunk coming out of it. I see it on the tray here. It's crazy how it breaks up the stuff. Okay, now I'm going to take my pipe cleaner. I'm just going to clean. That smallest one fits in almost all these parts. And that one fits pretty snug, so that does a good job. Wow, it brought out a bunch of gunk. Like, I don't know if you can see it or not, but lots of little pieces of dried up paint just came out of that thing. I didn't know it was that bad. That also causes your needle to drag through there, and it'll cause your needle to stay out. It won't allow it to move freely. Your spring's going to do a lot more work. Okay. Now this here, I'm just going to put a little bit of lube on it. Okay. We'll just set that down. It's ready to go. Now we're going to take this part here. It's going to take the larger. See how that fits? Clean it. And all these threads. Our towel that's soaked in lacquer thinner. Wipe everything down. Set her down. Your spring. Damp it down. Actually, you can take your bottle. Just kind of spritz some on there. And then just dry it off. Be very careful not to lose these little parts. That's why I do it over this tray. So if I drop it, it's like, oh, yeah, it stays. I've had them go on the floor, and who knows where it'll end up whenever you lose it on the floor. So, all right. Now that we have all those parts that were together, cleaned up, we can go ahead and start putting it back together if we want it, just so we have it ready to go back in the airbrush. I'm putting my spring back on. Put that back on. Now you got that, see, now it's spring loaded. And we can just start this on there a little ways so it doesn't fall off. Okay, now we need to clean our trigger. Just gonna wipe it off with that lacquer thinner on the towel there. Make sure there's no gunk in between. Make sure this is all loose and moving easy. You can also put some of this lube on there, right on that pivot, and let it go down just a little bit on the part that gets inserted into the airbrush. Alright, now this is fun. You gotta line this back up. We get it lined back up and then trigger it. If that thing springs easy, then we're good to go. If it's still got a catch in it, then we need to clean a little better. It's doing well, but that has to go in before we put this next part in. The pointy side up goes right behind the trigger. The threads, make sure you have it threaded correctly. Go ahead and tighten her back down. This just gets snug. You don't go crazy tight with anything. It's better to leave it just hand tight than wrench anything, because that's what ruins these airbrushes. I want to go ahead and put the tip back in. I just set this in like this and make sure it's seated in there, and I hold this upward over my tray. I treat this as delicate as I can, because if this gets damaged, you can order new parts. I prefer not to. And I think it's like 20-30 bucks, if not more now. Okay, screw my very end on. There is an O-ring in here. Sometimes you got to replace those if it starts leaking out the side here. Get it tight, just hand tight. Now this one here you want a little more snug, because if the air leaks past, it causes this to spit. So we'll just go ahead, snug it down, snug with your hand. Do not use a wrench on it unless absolutely have to, which I've never had a reason to need to. Now, if you look, everything's easy to move. It was kind of catching earlier, that's why I needed to clean it, so I figured to make a video on it. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and run our needle through. Be very, very careful with that. You do not want to bend that needle. These are very, very fine tipped. Okay, I don't go and push in on it really hard. I just go until it stops, and then I'll tighten it down. Okay, that just seats that needle right into that nozzle there. Alright, things back together. Go ahead and put the end on. If I need to tighten that needle up more into the tip, all I'd have to do is loosen that and push it in just a little bit more and tighten it down. But we want to, better to leave it a little looser than too tight, because too tight will ruin it. Okay, that's hand tight. Alright, now what I do for my final step is I put a little bit of lacquer thinner in it. I run urethane paints, that's why I have to use lacquer thinner. If you're water-based, they have cleaners for that. Maybe I'll do a video on cleaning a water-based setup. The very last thing I do is I put some lacquer thinner in there. I turn on my air. I got a quick connect, which I love this side. Way I can switch between my two airbrushes quickly. Alright, and then I just shoot some thinner through it. I don't know if you can see that coming through. It's coming out real nice. It's not spitting, it's coming out smooth. Okay, there's your clean, ready to go airbrush.